Montana Territory, autumn of 1883. The wind carried the scent of pine and coming snow when Zadie Ellers stepped off the stagecoach into the dust-blown town of Alder Creek with nothing but her medical bag and the memories no one would let her forget. She squared her shoulders under her plain wool cloak, boots scuffing against the packed earth of Main Street. Faces turned. Some stared. Others looked away. The past followed her like a shadow, even here 500 miles from where it had happened. Zadie Ellers, a tall man in a brown duster, called out from beside the livery. "That's me," she said, adjusting her grip on her bag. "I am Jonas, doctor's apprentice. Doc Hensley sent me. Said you would be helpin' at the clinic while his leg heals." She nodded. "Lead the way." They crossed town, past the mercantile, the saloon with its sagging porch, and the church with a crooked cross. Children played in the dust. A pair of older women watched her from the general store steps, their whispers loud enough to reach her. "Is that her? The nurse from Kansas? The one they say ran from a scandal?" Zadie kept her chin up. She always did. Inside the small clinic, the air smelled of carbolic and lye. She rolled up her sleeves and washed her hands. The old doctor's leg was in a brace, propped on a stool. He looked her over with a furrowed brow but said nothing about the past, just nodded once and left her to work. 3 days later, she was called out to the Whitlow ranch. A ranch hand had taken a horn to the ribs. She rode out with her bag strapped to the back of the mare they loaned her. The ranch sprawled across the foothills, fences stretching long and straight. Men paused their work to watch her ride in. One of them stepped forward, tall, lean, and sun-browned, with a scar across his left cheek and kind eyes that did not flinch when they met hers. "I reckon you're the nurse," he said. "I am." "Where's the injured man?" "In the barn. He is conscious. Hurts like hell." She followed him in, aware of his quiet strength and the way he kept glancing back to make sure she was keeping up. "Name's Daven Wyatt," he said. "Been on this ranch 6 years. The one you are patching up is Colt. He is stubborn, so you will have to be firm with him." "I can handle stubborn," she said. Daven gave a small laugh. "That's so." She treated Colt's wound, stitched it clean through gritted teeth and curses. Daven held him still without complaint. When it was done, she stepped outside to wash her hands in the basin. "You are good at what you do," Daven said, arms crossed, watching her. "Thank you," she said. "Not everyone agrees." "I am not everyone." She looked up at him. "No, you are not." Word spread fast, as it always did. Within the week, the whispers followed her into the church pews and the feed store. A woman pressed her hand to her daughter's shoulder and turned her away as Zadie passed. "She should not be tending children," the woman muttered. The reason? A lie that had traveled far and wide, that she had let a baby die, that she had loved a man she should not have, that she had run because she was guilty. The truth was simpler and harder. She had done everything she could. The baby had died anyway, and the man he had left her to face the blame alone. Zadie kept working. She tended bullet wounds, set broken bones, delivered babies in cold cabins. But the town's trust stayed just out of reach. Except for Daven. He started showing up at the clinic with excuses: a sore wrist, a deep splinter, a neighbor's fever. He stayed quiet most times, but when he spoke, his words stuck. "You are not the only one with a past, Zadie." She studied his face that evening, the firelight dancing along his jaw as he helped her sort bandages. "No?" He shook his head. "I have done things I do not talk about. Rode with men I wish I had not. But you keep going. That is what matters." Their hands brushed over the linen. She did not pull away. One evening near the end of October, a boy named Parker showed up at the clinic. Pale, shivering, no more than 6. His cheeks were hollow, his coat threadbare. He had walked from the mining camps alone. "Where are your parents?" Zadie asked, kneeling to his level. "Gone," the boy whispered. "They left. Said they would come back. That was 3 days ago." Zadie wrapped him in a blanket and gave him warm broth. He clung to her after, small fingers digging into her sleeve. "We will find someone to take him in," Doc Hensley said later. "I will," Zadie replied without thinking. "He can stay with me." Daven came by that night with firewood. He found Parker asleep on a cot. Zadie sitting beside him with a worn book in her lap. "You took him in?" he asked. "I had to." Daven knelt beside her, close enough their shoulders touched. "You are not like most folks." "No," she said softly. "I am not." He reached out and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. For the first time in years, she did not flinch. The next morning, Parker followed her like a shadow. When she went to check on a fevered woman, Daven offered to watch him. "Trust me," he said. "I do," she replied, and meant it. But the town was not kind. That same afternoon, Zadie found two women standing outside the clinic door. One of them pointed a finger at Parker. What kind of nurse takes in an abandoned child when she could not save the last one? Zadie froze. Her voice caught in her throat. Then Daven stepped between them, his voice low but sharp. "You will not speak to her like that again," he said. "She is more decent than the lot of you." "You do not know what she did," one of the women snapped. "I know enough," he said, "and I will stand beside her." "Always." The women turned and walked away. Zadie stood still, heart pounding. Daven turned back to her, his jaw set. "You should not have to keep paying for what was not your fault," he said. She swallowed hard. "You meant it?" "About standing beside me." He nodded. "I do not care about your past. I care about you." She looked past him to where Parker was drawing in the dirt with a stick. Then back to Daven, who had not moved. "I care about you too," she whispered. He stepped closer, took her hand. She closed her eyes and let herself lean into him just a little. For the first time in years, the weight she carried felt lighter. The cold came early that year. By the time November settled into the valley, frost clung to the fence rails and the creek ran thin and sharp beneath a skin of ice. Zadie kept Parker bundled in a second-hand coat patched at the elbows, and most days he stayed close to the stove in the rear room of the clinic, sorting dried herbs or tracing letters with a cracked pencil on scrap paper. Daven stopped by less often now, not from distance, but duty. The Whitlow herd had lost 3 calves to wolves, and he rode fence lines from dawn until long after dusk, returning with wind-burnt cheeks and a deep weariness in his shoulders. One evening, just after the lamps had been lit, Zadie opened her door to find him there, his hat in hand, coat dusted with snow. "You look half frozen," she said, stepping aside. "I brought something," he said, holding up a small tin pail. "Cook at the ranch made stew. Said Parker might take to it." Parker peeked from behind the curtain, eyes wide. Zadie nodded toward the stove. "You can sit if you've got time." He removed his gloves slowly, fingers stiff. "An hour, maybe. I've got to head back before the sky closes in." They ate in the quiet, the only sound the clink of spoons and the occasional crack from the fire. Zadie watched Parker press close to Daven's side, trusting him in a way he hadn't with anyone else. "He doesn't eat this well often," she said, voice low. "He should," Daven replied. "He's just a boy." Zadie nodded, folding her hands in her lap. "It's strange how fast he's become. Mine, somehow." Daven looked at her then, eyes full of something that flickered just beneath the surface. "You're good for him." She didn't look away. "And for you." He hesitated, then said, "I think you're the first person I've spoken to in years who sees me for more than what I've done." The wind rattled the shutters. Parker curled on the cot, sleep tugging at his limbs. Zadie stood and pulled the blanket over him, smoothing his hair with a touch that lingered. Later, when Daven rose to leave, he paused in the doorway, the lamplight catching in his hair, damp from melted snow. "You'll be at the town gathering tomorrow?" he asked. "I wasn't planning on it." "You should come. It's harvest fair. Parker might like the music." Zadie hesitated, then nodded. "If he wants to go, we'll come." The next afternoon, the town square was strung with lanterns and pine boughs. Children ran between hay bales. A fiddler played near the well, stomping one boot in rhythm. Zadie kept to the edges, her shawl drawn close, eyes on Parker as he joined a game of hoops with other boys. "You came," Daven said, stepping beside her with a cup of cider in his hand. "You asked." He handed her the cup. "You need something warm." She took it, fingers brushing his again. "Thank you." They stood like that for a time, shoulder to shoulder, watching the town move around them. No one spoke to her directly, but no one turned away either. That was new. "I've been thinking," Daven said after a while. "When spring comes, I'm planning to take a section of land east of the ridge. Mr. Whitlow's giving me first rights to lease it. I could run my own head." Build a place. She sipped the cider, heart slowing into something steady. That's a good plan. I'd want help, he added. Not just with the land. With everything. She turned toward him, the air between them full of something unsaid. I mean if you, he paused, cleared his throat, if you wanted a place to stay. For you and Parker. Zadie studied his face, the lines that deepened when he was unsure. You're not just saying this out of kindness, are you? No, he said. I don't want to go on alone anymore. Not when I've got something real standing right in front of me. She looked out over the square where Parker was laughing, running between two boys with a borrowed scarf trailing behind him. Then back at Daven. I haven't had a home in a long time. You could have one now. Zadie reached for his hand, folding her fingers through his. I want that, she said. With you. He smiled then, not wide but certain, and she leaned into his side, warm against the November air. The music carried on around them, but everything they needed was right there, in the stillness between them and the quiet promise of what came next. December settled over Alder Creek like a thick wool blanket, damp, weighty, and still. Snow clung to rooftops, muffled the sound of wagons, and turned the pine-covered hills to quiet silhouettes. At the edge of town, the clinic's small chimney puffed thin trails of smoke into the gray sky. Zadie kept the lamps lit longer now, not for work, but for warmth, and because Parker had taken to reading aloud to her in the evenings. His voice was tentative but steady, tracing each word with a care that made her chest ache. One morning, as she was folding bandages near the stove, the door creaked open and Daven stepped inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. I told Parker I'd bring him something, he said, holding out a hand-carved wooden horse, its mane darkened with soot for color. Zadie took it, weighing its smooth heft in her palm. He'll be proud of this. He's never had anything made just for him. Daven pulled off his gloves and sat on the bench near the window. I figured he ought to have something that lasts. Zadie placed the horse on the shelf above Parker's cot and joined him by the window, hands still damp from the wash basin. You've been quiet the past few days. I've been thinking on the land, he said, gaze fixed on the street outside. Found a spring close to where the barn would go. Soil's dark, holds water. If I get a hand or two come spring, I can start fencing the north slope. She watched the muscles shift in his jaw and waited. He turned to her. I've never built anything that wasn't meant to be left behind. Most places I've been, I never thought I'd stay longer than the season. Zadie tilted her head. What makes this different? Daven looked at her fully then, brows softened. Because I know who I want to build it with. She reached across the space between them, her fingers curling around his. I want that too. But it's more than just the house. I know. His voice dropped. That's why I want to ask you something. She blinked. What is it? I've been talking to Mr. Whitlow. There's a parcel adjoining the one he's leasing me. He'll let me claim both, but only if I register it proper come spring. He paused. I want to put your name down beside mine. Zadie stared at him, breath caught somewhere between ribs and throat. You don't have to give me an answer now, he said quickly. But I wanted you to know what I'm thinking. You're offering me more than a place to stay, she said. I'm offering you a life. One with a roof we built ourselves. With evenings where you don't have to look over your shoulder. Zadie stood, walked to the small shelf, and picked up the wooden horse. She turned it over in her hands, then looked back at him. I never thought I'd be asked to be part of anything again, she said. Let alone something honest. He stood too, slowly, and came to stand beside her. I don't want a nurse with no place to go, he said. I want you. Who you are now, not who you used to be. Her eyes welled, but she didn't look away. Then yes, she said. Write my name beside yours. Daven nodded once, a quiet breath leaving his chest. I'll start framing the east wall once the thaw sets. It'll face the ridge, you'll be able to see the valley when you wake. That night, she told Parker by lamplight, her voice low and certain. He listened, wide-eyed, then asked, Will there be chickens? Zadie laughed, the sound rising like warmth. As many as you want. And will Daven live there too? Yes, she said. He will. Parker turned the wooden horse in his hands and whispered, Good. I like him. Later, after the boy had fallen asleep, Zadie stepped outside. The snow had stopped, and the world lay hushed beneath a silver sky. Daven stood near the hitch post, hat pulled low. I didn't want to leave without saying good night, he said. She stepped into his arms, her cheek against his coat. You're not leaving. Not really. He tipped her chin so she would look at him. I'll come back first light. Thought we could ride out to the ridge. I want you to see where the house will stand. I'd like that. He leaned down, and their lips met gentle, certain, and without hesitation. The wind tugged at her shawl, but she didn't feel the cold. When he pulled back, she kept her hand on his chest, just over his heart. I've waited a long time to feel safe, she said. You are now, he answered. With me you always will be. She watched him walk into the night, snow crunching under his boots, and truly knew that this time nothing would be taken from her. Not her name, not her place, not the family they were quietly becoming. The ridge stood bare against the late winter sky, its western slope blanketed in snow that hadn't yet melted. Zadie rode behind Daven along the narrow trail, Parker bundled in front of her, arms looped around the saddle horn. The boy's breath fogged the air as he leaned into Zadie's chest, quiet but alert. Daven dismounted first. Just up here, he said, pausing to offer his hand. Zadie swung down, boots crunching against the packed ground. She adjusted Parker's hat and lifted him down beside her. The wind came steady off the higher peaks, cold but clean, with the scent of pine and sleeping earth beneath it. This is where the house sit, Daven said, motioning to a gentle rise edged with young cottonwoods. Spring runoff won't touch it, and the sun hits here first. Zadie stepped forward, letting her eyes follow the curve of land, the way it opened toward distant hills. I can see the draw from here, she said. That'll make it easier to track weather coming over. I figured you'd notice that. Daven's voice carried a quiet pride. I thought we'd put the porch facing south. You'll get light all afternoon. Parker wandered off toward a cluster of stones, dragging a stick through the snow behind him. Zadie ran her gloved fingers through the air, tracing invisible walls. Kitchen here. Stove against the back wall, so the heat carries into the sleeping room. And a window above the basin, Daven added. So you can watch the boy while you work. She looked at him then, her gaze steady. You've thought it through. I've had time. They walked the perimeter together, each step marking a future wall, a place where a life would live. At the spot where the door would be, Daven stopped. I never told you about my sister, he said, eyes on the snow at his feet. She died before I left Missouri. Fever took her in 3 days. Zadie folded her arms. You were close. She raised me after Ma passed, taught me how to sew a saddle bag with even stitches. I didn't have much use for it on the trail, but I kept the needle roll she made. Zadie leaned into his shoulder, listening. She used to say, the world's rough, but it don't mean you have to be. Took me a long time to figure what that meant. And now, he looked at her, eyes darker than the sky overhead. Now it means building something that holds, no matter what's come before. They stood for a while in the silence, broken only by Parker's humming. The boy had gathered a small pile of rocks and was arranging them in a ring. Is he all right? Daven asked, nodding toward him. He's not afraid anymore, Zadie answered. That's a kind of healing. I remember being afraid, he said. I just stopped letting it show. She brushed snow from her hem. I think Parker's teaching us both. They started back down the trail as the sky began to deepen. The sun dipped low, casting pale gold across the crusted snow. Zadie held Parker in the saddle while Daven walked beside them, leading her horse by the reins. I've been meaning to ask, he said after a while. Do you miss nursing in a proper hospital? No, she said without pause. I miss having help, clean linens, but not the walls or the silence after something goes wrong. He nodded, watching her. You ever think about teaching? Other women, I mean. I've thought about it, she said. But it takes more than one pair of hands to start something like that. You've got mine, he said. She glanced down at him and a quiet warmth stirred in her chest. Then maybe that's enough. They reached town as twilight settled, the lamps already lit in the windows. Parker had fallen asleep against her, his small body heavy and warm. Daven reached up to lift him down, careful not to wake him. I'll carry him, he said. Zadie opened the clinic door and stepped back as Daven passed through, Parker's head resting against his shoulder. She watched them, rooted in the doorway, the weight of the moment pressing into her ribs. Inside, Daven laid Parker on the cot, tucking the quilt up to his chin. The boy stirred but didn't wake. Zadie lit the lamp above the stove and turned as Daven moved toward her. He trusts you. I'm glad, Daven said. Because I don't want to be a man he only sees on Sundays. Zadie rested her hand on the table's worn edge. You won't be. He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the heat from his coat. I'd like us to marry before the ground thaws, he said. Not for show. Just to set things right. She looked up at him, her voice low. I'd like that too. Daven nodded once. We'll keep it simple. Just the preacher, a witness, or two. Then we'll start building. Zadie reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. We already are. That night, after he left, she stood at the window long after the lamps had burned low, watching the snow fall soft and silent across the street. Behind her, Parker slept without stirring. The air smelled faintly of pine and wood smoke. She whispered into the stillness, thank you, not to anyone in particular, but to the quiet, to the land, to the man who had chosen her without asking her to be anyone else. And for the first time, the word home didn't feel like a memory. It felt like tomorrow. The sun broke through late in the week, soft light spilling across the thawing earth like a promise. Mud clung to wagon wheels and the air still bit when the wind shifted, but the worst of winter had passed. In the fields beyond Alder Creek, patches of brown began to show through the snow and a low mist hung over the hills at first light. Zadie stood by the wash basin in the clinic's back room, sleeves rolled to her elbows, skin pink from the cold water. Parker sat on a stool nearby, whittling a stick with a small penknife Daven had given him under her watchful eye. You done soon? He asked, glancing up between careful cuts. Almost. You ready to help with the herbs? He nodded, setting the knife aside. I want to sort the chamomile. I'll make sure you get the biggest jar. The door creaked before she could dry her hands. Daven stepped inside, hair damp with snowmelt, carrying a folded canvas saddlebag. I picked something up for you in Deer Hollow, he said, setting it on the table. Parker leaned in, eyes wide. What is it? Zadie unbuckled the flap and pulled out a bolt of cotton wrapped in brown paper. She unfolded it slowly, revealing a pale green fabric with tiny stitched flowers just visible in the weave. I thought you might want something new to wear, Daven said. For the wedding. She ran her fingers over the cloth, throat tight. I haven't had a dress made for me since I left Topeka. I asked the tailor's wife what color would suit you, he said. She said this would bring out your eyes. I hope she was right. She was, Zadie said quietly. Parker reached for the edge of the fabric. Will it have buttons? Wood ones, she said, smoothing the cloth. I'll carve them myself. They married 2 days later in the barn behind the Whitlow Ranch, where the ground was dry and the walls held out the wind. The preacher wore his Sunday coat and read from a worn Bible that smelled faintly of pipe smoke. Daven had shaved and combed his hair flat, though a lock still fell across his brow when he turned his head. Zadie wore the green dress, simple and neat, with sleeves to her wrists and a hem just above her boots. She had stitched each seam by hand, Parker watching from the cot with a quiet pride that said more than words. There were only 5 people present besides the preacher. Whitlow nodded solemnly from the back, and Martha, who kept books at the mercantile, stood beside Parker to make up the witness count. No one brought flowers, but someone had left a single sprig of sage tied with twine on the step outside. I take you as you are, Daven said, voice steady. As I am, Zadie echoed, her hand in his. When it was done, Martha served coffee from a basket and passed around molasses biscuits wrapped in linen. Parker darted between them, face flushed, calling Zadie Mrs. Wyatt. until she laughed and told him he could still call her by name. That night, Daven stayed with them in the clinic. His saddle hung beside Parker's coat on the wall. The cot was moved to the front room, and Zadie placed a small bowl of water beside it, same as always. Nothing shifted loudly. It all settled gentle, like stones fitting into a riverbed. Daven sat on the edge of the bed while Zadie braided her hair by lamplight. "I didn't think I'd feel different," she said. "But I do." He reached for her hand. "So do I." Later, as the fire crackled low and the town outside softened into sleep, she curled into his side beneath the quilt. His arms settled around her and she let her hand rest over his heart. Neither spoke. There was no need. By spring, the frame of the house stood strong against the hill. Zadie packed the clinic supplies each evening, wrapping glass jars in newspaper and labeling every tin. The building would stay open under Doc Hensley's full care, but she no longer needed its walls to prove her worth. Every morning, Parker walked beside the wagon as Daven hauled beams up the ridge. He carried nails in a tin and handed them up with careful fingers. Zadie brought sandwiches wrapped in cloth and sat with them on the half-built porch, watching clouds move over the peaks. By midsummer, the house had a roof. They installed windows in early August, glass panes hauled in from Helena, wrapped in wool and straw. The night they moved in, Zadie lit a lamp and stood in the doorway, Parker pressed to her side. Daven placed the last chair by the hearth and dusted his hands. "No one's chasing us here," he said. "No one's judging us." Zadie leaned her head against his shoulder. "We built it ourselves. Every inch. We'll fill it slow," he said. "With good things. With quiet." Before bed, Parker placed the wooden horse on a shelf in the main room, its hooves lined up straight, its painted mane worn smooth. Zadie kissed his forehead and tucked him under the new quilt she'd sewn from scraps. He fell asleep with the window open to the breeze. That night, she stood with Daven on the porch, the moonlight silvering the ridge. His hand found hers, rough and warm. "You still sure?" he asked. She looked out over the land they'd claimed, the fences stretching across the hills, the soft flicker of lamplight inside their home. "I've never been more certain of anything." He turned to her, brushing her cheek with his thumb. "Then let's stay here. Grow old here. Teach the boy how to build things that last. We already are." They kissed beneath the stars, the wind rustling the trees below, the earth steady beneath their feet. There were no doubts left, no ghosts at their backs. Only the house, the land, and each other. And that was enough to last the rest of their days.